It's good to be with you all here at ALEC again on this really critical topic. It's very hard for government to think long term. The fact that you're even in the room puts you in a small category of legislators, and I appreciate you being here. I do want to point out an article by David that is in some of the materials. It's got his pretty mug on it with a kind of a red sweater vest type thing. No, it's not a vest. I wouldn't put that on David, but it talks about how Congress ignored the fact that in 1979 the United States passed the 34 state threshold for applications for a convention. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the lawsuit that I think will be necessary to make this actually happen. And my action item for you is to, on a friendly way, harass your Attorney General about bringing this case. Most of you in here will be from states that qualified at some point between about 1979 to the best window is 1979 to 83, but it goes on. There were well over 34 states. But to count to 34 and beyond is states that passed what are called plenary, what we call plenary applications, which means just we want a convention. And states that passed by whatever name they used, balanced budget amendment requirements, fiscal responsibility amendments, that subject, when you add those two up, it was far in excess of the 34 states required. So that leads to the potential, well, first of all, the Constitution says when that circumstance is hit, Congress shall call a convention, shall. It is not discretionary. That leads me to the writ of Mandamus. This is your Latin lesson for the day. In Virginia, we still use Latin in the practice of law. And a writ of Mandamus is an order from a court to a governmental entity to do a non-discretionary act. It's an order from the court to go forward. States, because these are state applications, have standing to sue the Congress, which has not performed its non-discretionary act of calling the convention since 1979. So I want to keep this real simple. I don't need you at all to go to law school. I just want you to understand the concept. Yes, this has never happened before. The history here is there hasn't been a constitutional convention called via the Article 5 process by the states before, but we passed this threshold in 1979. And the legal theory, the legal argument is once that threshold was passed, the obligation was laid upon Congress. And whether or not, one might say with rescissions today, Congress, there are still more than 34 states, doesn't change the fact, I'll use a criminal term, you can't unring the bell. And this is a phrase courts would recognize. You can't uncommit a crime. If I steal from you but then give it back, I have still committed the crime of stealing from you. In the same way, once we crossed the threshold of 34 states, the bell was rung, the Liberty Bell in this case, and it cannot be unrung, is the argument. Yes, it will be awkward for the courts. Who cares? Yes, you will have to go to the Supreme Court because you will be suing in the DC Circuit, which is not going to be friendly to you. It's a very pro-establishment court, and ultimately any political leanings will lean against. But you do have an originalist Supreme Court today. You do have an opportunity with that Supreme Court that really hasn't existed prior to the 3 Trump appointees. So again, the process is, I'll use Indiana as an example, since Robert's here and we were with the senator last night. Indiana, was it the first, David? It was the first state to pass an amendment along the lines or request an amendment, an application as I'm describing. So their Attorney General, Todd Rokita, could sue on behalf of Indiana. You would literally sue Congress. You'd sue the majority leader and the speaker and the two bodies, of course, in their official capacities. You're not suing the archivist. You're not suing others. Those are functionaries. And the lawsuit would be to have the court order Congress to call the convention. The court will not tell Congress how to call the convention. Technically, you know, activist judges do all sorts of things, but let's be realistic. They're just going to throw it back to Congress. Congress is going to be in a position where they're forced to do this. Historically, when states got close to 34 to the 2/3, Congress passed the amendment that was at issue. Well, not for a balanced budget, not for fiscal responsibility. They have done everything they can to bury it. But your attorneys general can be, and I wrote a book with this title, so you can consider this a plug, the last line of defense. And on the fiscal responsibility amendment, I believe that will be absolutely necessary. And before I sit down, before I went to the dark side, went to law school, I was an engineer. I'm a numbers guy. For any of you that hear the arguments about not doing a convention, pull out your United States map and count the conservative states. We can argue about whether it's 18 or 21, but it's more than 13. And what matters in protecting against a bad amendment, which is the boogeyman the other side uses to fight the convention, is the ability to stop a bad amendment. Not in the convention, but in the states. We have 18 no votes for a bad amendment, maybe 21. And when I say votes, I mean absolutely dead on reliable. There are about 12 liberal states. This will have to happen on a bipartisan basis if it's going to come to fruition. But I just want you to have that one argument. Maybe it's because I'm an engineer, it drives me crazy that people run around so scared of the convention. Our side has the backstop. Their side doesn't. That's argument one. Argument two, there's already a constitutional convention sitting every day, and it's called the Supreme Court. And in our lifetimes, they have thoroughly rewritten the Constitution. It's time the states took it back and did the one thing, the one most important thing that could put our country on a path to long-term sustainability. Thank you all very much. And all your AGs know how to get a hold of me. They're welcome to call and we can have this conversation. And I've had a few of them, and so far none have stepped forward. That's why you all can play such an important role. Thank you all very much.